Ok, ciao a tutti e buon pomeriggio. Today we have some old school cool Italian Bimota. Now, I'm very passionate about Bimota and actually worked at the factory in development and test ride in the early 2000s. So I worked on bikes like the SB8K and the DB5 and DB6 Delirio and developed the new models and worked with the engineers and stuff to build the prototypes and things like that. And at the time, my father was actually the importer for the UK for Bimota, so it's very, very ingrained in me, and I'm very passionate about the mark. For those of you that don't know, Bimota is three men. BI, Bianchi, MO is Mori, and TA is Tamburini, and Tamburini is perhaps the most important part of Bimota. Obviously, he went on to design the 916 and is considered to be one of the greatest motorcycle designers of all time. And he sort of perfected his craft at Bimota and was building frames and motorcycles that actually handled and worked quite a long time before other people had got their head around it. And the formula for Bimota was genius. They took the best of Japan, which was the engines, and put them into the best of Italy, which was a chassis. And they then went on to use the best brakes with Brembo, Marzocchi forks and Campagnolo wheels, and they built probably the first proper super bikes. And this is maybe equivalent to a V4R Ducati now, certainly in price. You know, if you had a Bimota back in the 70s, I mean, this was released in 1977. If you had a Bimota back then, not only were you wealthy, you were a real sort of connoisseur of motorcycles. This was high-end, special, incredible, exotic machinery. I mean, it was something way out there. You know, I suppose these days it's quite common for somebody to have a Ducati superbike or an Aprilia or whatever, which is quite a special piece of kit. This was ultra rare, ultra special, and really quite incredible. I've done a little bit of maths. Used an online calculator. When this was new, if you bought a complete bike off Bimota, it was 8.1 million lira, which according to Google is approximately £30,000 in today's money. And so this was real high-end stuff, you know, and nobody had one, and it was very special. And this is the Z1000 Kawasaki engine. Which is a fantastic lump. This particular bike has had a big bore kit and shim under bucket conversion and a couple of other bits and bobs, and so it's a bit pokier than your standard KB1. It's also been beautifully restored and is really nicely presented. There were a couple of options as well on the KB1, and this is what they call an A bike. So this came with the Marzocchi forks and the twin Brembo brakes. Believe it or not, they actually, a lot of these had a single disc, which is what you had on the Dona Kawasaki. Because you could either buy this as a kit and sort of use your Kawasaki as a donor, or you could buy a complete bike. The kit was still about £15,000 equivalent of, and so it wasn't cheap to buy the kit. But if you got Bimota to build you a complete motorcycle, you're into sort of 37, like I say. Now this was actually one of the more popular Bimotas in history. They made 827 in total. That's kits and complete bikes combined, and so it's actually, by Bimota standards, that's quite a lot. There are some Bimotas where they only made 50 or 100 or something. But the reason they made quite a lot is because it was an excellent bike. It was very popular and it really worked. I think I remember, I can't remember the facts exactly, but I remember seeing a photograph of a journalist getting his knee down on one of the early Bimotas. It may have been an HB2, similar sort of period. And he'd wrapped some tape around his leathers and was scraping his knee, and it was the first time anybody got their knee down on a road bike. It wasn't done. Now it's commonplace, you know, everybody's doing it, it's normal, it's easy. But back then, chassis were so poor, tyres were so poor, everything was so poor. The idea of getting your knee down was only, you know, a handful of GP riders. But all of a sudden with a Bimota it was possible, because they made such a step forward in in handling and road bikes and ground clearance and all the sort of things. Some interesting bits on this. You've actually got an adjustable swinging arm pivot, as well as the centric chain adjusters at the back there. You can actually move the swing arm pivot on the front, and you know, it's sort of a very sort of compact, low wraparound frame. Get the height low, we put the frame all the way round the outside of the engine, and that allows to keep the sort of the size of the bike quite small and compact. Obviously they do that now on all the aluminium twin spar frames and stuff that we see coming out of Japan. It became the norm. At this point, people didn't do it. You had a traditional sort of loop frame that went over the top, or a spine frame, as they're known to have a spine down the top here with the tank that dropped over. And so this was the first sort of trellis wraparound frame. What I really love about this is some of the details, the sort of hand machined exotic components that you find this, and there's little Bimota stamps in things like on the petrol cap here and on the levers and on bits and bobs, and when you look at this bike, I think it's the details that really make it something special. You don't see details like that on bikes now, particularly. You didn't see it on bikes back then. Only on sort of handcrafted exquisite machinery like this would you actually get to see that sort of workmanship and those little details and stuff. The gear linkage system on the side here, I'll have to get the camera and show you later. They've got this rocker system and all this, but it's so complicated, it's so over-engineered, it's incredible. But that's how Bimota did things, and that's, you know, you got what you paid for, and it was a very special motorcycle. As ever, I will get the camera and show you some of these details close up, and then maybe, being as it's sunny, we'll get this out and see if we can get a few shots of it on the road and stuff, and so you can see it in action. Wonderful piece of motorcycling history. Like I say, this particular bike is one we've got for sale as normal. It's been beautifully restored. It's got a slightly modified engine and a few other little bits and bobs, which was quite commonplace on these, because obviously you got a chassis that could cope with it, and these Kawasaki engines were very tunable. But you know, what a beautiful thing, what a great piece of history. Early days of Bimota, early days of Tamburini. This is where it all started for superbikes like we know them today. You know, I think Bimota paved the way for some of the stuff that we see now. Certainly with Tamburini going on to do the 916 and the F4 MV and things like that. He's one of the great sort of legends of all time, and this is some of his great early work. Very collectible, very nice to own, great to ride. What a wonderful machine. Okay, so here we are up close and personal, just showing you a few of the details. When you look at this top yoke, look at the sort of work and the design and all the craziness that has gone into this, that only Bimota really did. And this hand machined cap on the top here with a little Bimota stamp in the middle, it's all just beautiful. This is the gear lever system that I mentioned, which is just bonkers really when you look at it. The work that's gone into this, why they decided to put this link around instead of just flipping the lever down here and having a longer rod, I don't know. But it's pretty crazy, pretty incredible, and you can see some of the work that's gone into this. You can also see how, now we're close up, how beautifully this is restored and presented. It's actually a really nice example. 2 batteries on this, which is quite unusual at the time. There's 2 little batteries, one either side at the front, just to keep the weight distributed and to sort of keep the size compact and things like that. You use the original Kawasaki clocks and switchgear and things like that, so it could all be swapped over, and to make it sort of a simple build. Nice, neat 4x1, and obviously this has got Brembo Goldline calipers all around, Campagnolo wheels, which is lovely, and you can see some of the work that's gone into the frame and all the tube bending and the sort of details to get it compact, and get the shock absorber in the back there. Obviously there wasn't that much stuff that was monoshock at this time. The Dona Kawasaki that this would have come, that the engine would have come from, was twin shock, of course, as was most stuff. So lot of sort of cutting edge, really nice stuff on this, and it's quite a good looking bike too. I think obviously around the time you had the SB2, which was really out there styling wise, this was a little bit more conservative, but still a great looking machine, and you know, and it was a genuine superbike. This was better than a lot of race bikes at the time, and really quite an incredible thing to own.